Hello, everyone, and welcome to Crime Alley Documentaries, the podcast where we delve deep into the darkest corners of human nature and the crimes that shock the world. I'm your host, and today we're unraveling the chilling story of Lowell Amos, a man whose charm hid a sinister secret. Lowell and Roberta Amos were a newlywed couple. They had their ups and downs during their relationship. But like any couple in love, they had decided that no matter what the path, they wanted to take the plunge and spend the rest of their lives together. It took some convincing, but finally, Roberta had said yes. Like any bride-to-be, she had her doubts, but she figured if anyone was worth risking it, it was Lowell. Lowell was a General Motors plant manager who made an apparently good living, and his job had perks, like the company executive party they attended in December 1994. They were at the Athenaeum Hotel in Detroit, and it was a great party. Everybody was drinking and dancing and having fun, and the party seemed to never end. But since the Amoses were newlyweds, everyone understood when they retired into their suite at 4:30 a.m. But this didn't mean that the party was over for the new couple. In fact, it had just started. Lowell and Roberta started drinking more when they got upstairs, and Roberta put on something, let's say, more comfortable. You know how it is when you're a newlywed. Everything automatically becomes sexier and you look for every opportunity to have a little bit of fun. And the Amoses seemed so in love. So after a drink or two, Lowell finally pulls out some more party favors to make things even more interesting. It was cocaine. And so, the party goes on. It's about 8:30 the next day when Lowell calls Bert Crabtree, another executive who was at the party the previous night. Bert, like everyone else, had had a long night of partying and was hoping to sleep in, but Lowell, he didn't seem like himself. In fact, he was panicking. He asked Bert to come to his room because there was an emergency and he didn't know what to do. So Bert and his worried partner Daniel Porcase head to the Amoses' room, wondering what they needed help with. But the second they walked in, they felt like something was way off. And it was. Roberta was lying on the bed naked, covered with a sheet. But she was so still. She was turning purple. Lowell didn't waste any time. He just blurted it out. Roberta had died in an accident while Lowell was sleeping. He just found her like this when he'd woken up that morning. But the question that Bert was asking was, why had Lowell called him? There was nothing he could do at that point. He should have called the police instead. Maybe he wanted him for emotional support? Maybe he was just panicking and couldn't think straight? Well, not exactly. Lowell handed him a sport coat. His sport coat, and asked him to hold on to it for him. It was weird, right? Then he said he needed to clean up before the police came because there was cocaine all over the room. Bert, in a haze, left the room and looked into Lowell's breast pocket. There was a small black leather case with a syringe with no needle. There was also a foul-smelling washcloth inside. Bert found the whole thing really weird, but thought he would ask about it once the whole thing settled down a little bit. Although, like all of us, he had his own very strong suspicions. The police arrived at the hotel room. They found Lowell in shock and his new wife dead. Even though he was in shock, the detectives started questioning Lowell about the events that had taken place after the party. He said that they had headed back to their room to have a little more fun. Roberta and Lowell had engaged in sexual acts when they got back to their room, but these acts involved cocaine. The thing was, because she had a sinus problem, Roberta had instead taken it inside her body, if you catch my drift. Then he continued that he'd fallen asleep, but as far as he remembered, Roberta was still up and was still taking drugs when he fell asleep. Then he woke up and found her dead. The story sounded real. I mean, it could happen. People overdose on drugs every day, unfortunately. But the thing was, the detective asked the forensic analyst to show up at the scene, which is apparently not something they do in overdose cases. Evidently, there was lipstick and tooth marks found on a pillowcase, but Roberta didn't seem to have any makeup on. Also, the bedsheets were slightly soiled, even though Roberta's body was clean. What does that show? Lowell had cleaned the body before the police arrived. But why would he do that? Even if he wanted to clean up the cocaine, there would have been traces of it in Roberta's body, which an autopsy would have revealed. I mean, he didn't even try to hide the fact that she had overdosed. This was the first thing he said during the report. Even if we say there was a lot of cocaine and he was trying to hide that, why would he clean Roberta's body? And that is exactly what the investigators were thinking. But like the story always goes, the police lacked enough concrete evidence to actually make an arrest. So they began surveillance and digging into his background. And what do you know? Just 2 days after Roberta's death, Lowell went out with 2 women and spent over $1,000 on dinner and drinks, and then proceeded to have sex with both of them. The police couldn't help but get more intrigued. You can't deny that this is far from how a person who's just lost his new wife acts. You can never tell how someone reacts to a huge loss. I'm in no position to judge that. But still, what the police had found at the crime scene put together with this, it seemed more than just mourning. And get this, when they looked into his life, they found that Roberta was Lowell's 3rd wife, and his first 2 wives and his mom had died under suspicious circumstances. Things were getting weirder and weirder. Also, Roberta's death and the suspicious circumstances surrounding her death gained national publicity, and several women came forward telling the investigators that they thought they had been drugged by Lowell before they had sex. Well, this all begged for further investigation into who this guy was. They found out that he was first married to a woman called Sandra. She had apparently mixed a sedative with wine, had collapsed and hit her head. The cause of death was ruled undetermined, but Lowell had received a $350,000 insurance payout. Sandra was only 36. Right after Sandra's death, Lowell married Carolyn, though the couple seemed to have problems from the very beginning. Why? Because as friends reported later on, they were constantly arguing over the large insurance policy Lowell had bought on her life. She even threw him out in 1988 because he simply refused to cancel the policy. The couple separate for a while and Lowell moves in with his mother. But a few weeks after he starts living with his mom, she is rushed to the hospital, but the doctors can't find anything wrong with her and send her home. Then after a few days, she dies unexpectedly. And since she was 76 years old, no autopsy was ever performed because the authorities figured she had died of natural causes. Lowell inherited more than $1 million. After all he had gone through, air quotes, Carolyn feels bad for him and allows him to move back in with her. And you know where this is going. 9 months later, she is found dead in the bathroom. Lowell told investigators that he had taken a glass of wine to the bathroom where she was blow-drying her hair next to a full bathtub. She had apparently been electrocuted. Let me also tell you this. This wine glass Lowell had brought her, it was never found at the scene. It was actually washed and dried and sitting in the dishwasher. Explain to me how someone can find their spouse passed out on the floor, suspect that they've been electrocuted, and then get the wine glass, go back to the kitchen and wash and dry it while they wait for the police and ambulance. No cause of death was ever determined, and Lowell received $800,000 from the insurance policy. Can you believe the nerve of this guy? But let's go back to Roberta's death. An autopsy was performed and it showed that there was in fact cocaine inside Roberta's vagina, but there was none externally. How could someone insert it inside their body but have none on the outside? Even if done through the nose, there will still be some residue. I know what you're thinking. Where was the syringe that Lowell had given to his coworker? When asked, Lowell claimed that the coat and the contents had disappeared, but you can guess what had really happened. Based on all this, Lowell was finally arrested for the murder of his third wife, Roberta. The defense claimed that Lowell had zero motive for killing Roberta, unlike his first two wives and his mom. But according to the witnesses, Roberta had already bought a house for herself and was planning on leaving Lowell and had told friends and family that she only wanted Lowell out of her life. In other words, his marriage was about to end. The prosecution claimed that Lowell had murdered Roberta because he couldn't stand rejection. They also went on to tell the court what had really happened on the night of the company party. They said he gave her a glass of wine with 2 crushed sedatives, which was apparently his MO. And then once she passed out, he injected her vagina with cocaine dissolved in water, and then smothered her with a pillow. And this is why he had to clean her body, and the reason why there was makeup residue on the pillowcase, but none on Roberta's face. On October 24, 1996, Lowell was convicted of premeditated murder, and on November 4, 1996, he was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Sadly, charges were never made in the cases of the other 3 murders. Lowell died in prison on January 5, 2022, a day after his 79th birthday. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Crime Alley Documentaries. If you enjoyed today's story, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. And as always, stay curious and stay safe. Until next time.